Welcome back, and thank you for joining us today. History often feels settled, as if the major questions about our past have already been answered. We are taught that human progress follows a steady path, moving slowly from simple tools to complex civilizations. But every so often, a discovery emerges that quietly challenges this comfortable story. Today, we begin exploring those discoveries, the ones that forced historians to pause, reconsider, and sometimes rethink everything they thought they knew. Our story starts with ancient structures that seem strangely out of place in time. Across the world, archaeologists have uncovered massive stone monuments, precisely aligned buildings, and carefully planned sites that do not match the technological expectations of their eras. These structures were not simple shelters or symbolic landmarks. They were carefully designed, requiring advanced planning, mathematical understanding, and a deep knowledge of materials. What makes these discoveries so remarkable is not just their size, but their precision. Stones weighing many tons were shaped and placed with accuracy that challenges traditional explanations. In some cases, the tools believed to be available at the time appear insufficient to explain how such work was achieved. This gap between what we expect and what we see has led historians to ask difficult questions. Were ancient societies more skilled than we once believed? Did they possess techniques that were later forgotten? Or are we underestimating the creativity and problem-solving abilities of early humans? These ancient structures remind us that history is not a fixed story carved in stone. It is a puzzle, constantly evolving as new evidence comes to light. And as we move forward in today's journey, we will see how one unexpected discovery can quietly reshape our understanding of the entire human past. Across multiple ancient sites, researchers have encountered something deeply puzzling, a level of engineering precision that seems far beyond what should have been achievable at the time. These are not rough constructions shaped by trial and error. Instead, they reveal careful measurement, consistent standards, and an understanding of materials that suggests advanced technical knowledge. Massive stone blocks were cut with flat surfaces and sharp angles, fitting together so tightly that even thin tools struggled to slide between them. In some locations, stones were shaped in complex, interlocking forms that increased stability without the use of mortar. This approach required not only skill, but also foresight and ability to plan entire structures long before the first stone was placed. What makes this especially surprising is that many of these techniques remain difficult to replicate today, even with modern machinery. Engineers attempting to reproduce similar results often rely on advanced cutting tools, computer modeling, and heavy equipment. Yet ancient builders achieved comparable outcomes using methods that are still debated and not fully understood. This precision raises important questions about how knowledge was developed and shared in the past. It suggests that technical expertise may have been passed down through generations, refined over time, and later lost due to social collapse, environmental change, or shifts in cultural priorities. Rather than representing a primitive stage of development, these structures hint at societies that valued accuracy, durability, and long-term thinking. Such discoveries challenge the assumption that ancient construction was always limited by basic tools and simple techniques. Instead, they point to a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity, one where craftsmanship, observation, and experience played a greater role than we once believed. As historians examine these structures more closely, they are forced to reconsider not just how these civilizations built, but how advanced their understanding of the world may truly have been. Among the most unsettling discoveries in archaeology are objects uncovered in places that do not fit established historical timelines. These artifacts appear in layers of earth, remote regions, or cultural contexts where they seemingly do not belong, creating contradictions that historians struggle to explain. In several cases, tools, ornaments, or crafted objects have been discovered far from the civilizations traditionally associated with them. This suggests that ancient people may have traveled greater distances than previously believed, crossing mountains, deserts, or oceans long before such journeys were considered possible. The presence of these items raises the possibility of early trade networks or cultural contact between distant societies. Even more puzzling are artifacts found in geological layers that appear far older than expected. While these findings are carefully examined and debated, they highlight how fragile historical timelines can be when new evidence emerges. A single misplaced object has the power to challenge decades of scholarly consensus. These discoveries force historians to consider uncomfortable alternatives. Perhaps migration occurred earlier than recorded. Perhaps knowledge spread through unknown routes. Or perhaps entire cultures existed that left only faint traces behind, erased by time, disaster, or gradual decay. Importantly, many of these artifacts were initially overlooked or dismissed. When evidence does not fit an existing framework, it is often set aside until further discoveries demand attention. Over time, patterns begin to form, and what once seemed like isolated anomalies starts to suggest a larger, more complex story. Artifacts found out of place do not offer simple answers. Instead, they invite deeper questions about how connected the ancient world truly was. They remind us that history is not just a record of what we have accepted, but a constantly evolving investigation shaped by what we are still discovering. Evidence from ancient sites around the world suggests that early civilizations possessed a surprisingly deep understanding of the sky and the patterns that governed it. Long before modern instruments existed, people were carefully observing celestial movements and recording them with remarkable accuracy. These observations were not random or symbolic alone. They were structured, repeatable, and mathematically informed. Many ancient structures are aligned with solar events such as solstices and equinoxes, or with the rising and setting of specific stars. Achieving this required long-term observation across generations, as well as precise measurement. Small errors would have accumulated over time, yet many of these alignments remain accurate even today, indicating a strong grasp of geometry and timing. Beyond architecture, ancient calendars reveal sophisticated systems for tracking time. Some civilizations divided the year with impressive precision, accounting for seasonal changes essential to agriculture and survival. These systems often relied on mathematical cycles that are still studied and admired for their elegance and efficiency. What challenges historians is not just that this knowledge existed, but that it appeared independently across different regions. Similar mathematical concepts and astronomical principles emerged in cultures separated by vast distances, suggesting either shared knowledge or parallel development at a level of complexity rarely attributed to ancient societies. This raises important questions about how early humans understood their world. Rather than being passive observers, they were active thinkers, capable of abstraction, prediction, and long-term planning. Their scientific awareness shaped religious practices, social organization, and construction methods. Such discoveries force historians to rethink the intellectual limits placed on ancient cultures. They reveal a past where careful observation and reasoning played a central role, reminding us that human curiosity and analytical thinking are far older than we once assumed. For a long time, early humans were portrayed as struggling to survive with limited skills and minimal organization. However, growing evidence paints a very different picture. Archaeological findings increasingly suggest that early societies were capable of complex planning, cooperation, and problem-solving far earlier than traditional narratives imply. Settlements show signs of intentional design, rather than random growth. Living spaces, storage areas, and communal zones were arranged with purpose, indicating social structure and shared goals. Tools were not only functional but specialized, crafted for specific tasks with consistency and refinement. This level of standardization suggests training, knowledge transfer, and long-term thinking. Beyond physical evidence, signs of symbolic behavior point to advanced cognitive abilities. Art, markings, and carefully arranged burial sites reveal abstract thinking and shared belief systems. These practices require communication, memory, and cultural continuity traits associated with sophisticated societies rather than primitive groups. What challenges historians most is the speed at which these abilities appear in the archaeological record. Instead of slow, gradual improvement, there are periods where innovation seems to accelerate rapidly. This raises the possibility that earlier phases of development are missing from our records, lost to erosion, rising seas, or natural disasters. Rather than viewing early humans as limited by their environment, these discoveries suggest adaptability and creativity played a central role in survival. Knowledge was accumulated, refined, and passed forward, allowing communities to respond effectively to changing conditions. This shift in perspective forces a re-evaluation of human potential in deep history. It suggests that intelligence, organization, and innovation are not recent developments, but fundamental traits that have shaped humanity since its earliest chapters. Hidden beneath forests, deserts, and layers of soil, lost cities have begun to emerge, reshaping how historians understand ancient societies. These were not small or disorganized settlements. Instead, they revealed carefully planned urban environments with roads, drainage systems, public spaces, and residential areas arranged in deliberate patterns. Modern surveying technologies have uncovered vast city layouts extending far beyond what was visible at ground level. Straight road networks, evenly spaced structures, and interconnected zones suggest centralized planning and coordinated labor. Such organization requires leadership, shared rules, and the ability to manage resources on a large scale. Water management stands out as one of the most impressive features of these cities. Canals, reservoirs, and controlled drainage systems show an advanced understanding of local environments. These systems were designed not only to support daily life but also to protect populations from flooding or seasonal changes, demonstrating long-term foresight. The existence of these cities challenges the idea that large-scale urban life developed slowly and only in a few regions. Instead, complex urban centers appear in multiple parts of the world, often earlier than expected. Many of them vanished not because they failed, but because environmental shifts, climate changes, or social transformations forced populations to move on. What remains are silent patterns etched into the landscape, waiting to be recognized. Each rediscovered city adds depth to the story of human civilization, revealing that complexity, cooperation, and innovation were widespread rather than rare. These findings push historians to reconsider how many cities may still be hidden and how much of human urban history remains buried, unseen, and waiting to be understood. One of the strongest assumptions in traditional history is that human development moves steadily forward, with each generation building upon the last. Yet archaeological evidence increasingly suggests that progress does not always follow a straight line. Instead, it can rise, stall, and even reverse under certain conditions. Across different regions, signs of advanced knowledge appear and then disappear from the historical record. Technologies once used effectively were later abandoned, and skills that required high levels of expertise seem to vanish entirely. This pattern suggests that progress can be fragile, dependent on stable environments, social structures, and the ability to preserve knowledge. Periods of collapse often coincide with environmental stress, resource shortages, or social upheaval. When these pressures increase, societies may prioritize survival over innovation. Specialized skills can be lost within just a few generations if they are no longer needed or supported. Over time, what was once common knowledge can fade into obscurity. This challenges the idea that later societies are always more advanced than earlier ones. In some cases, communities that came afterward inherited fewer skills, simpler tools, or reduced understanding of certain techniques. Progress, rather than accumulating endlessly, appears to reset in localized or regional ways. Recognizing this pattern changes how historians interpret gaps in the archaeological record. Instead of viewing them as evidence of slow development, they may represent moments of decline or transition. These gaps remind us that human history is shaped by adaptation as much as advancement. By accepting that progress is uneven, historians gain a more realistic view of the past, one where knowledge can be lost as easily as it is gained, and where survival often takes precedence over innovation. Throughout history, powerful natural events have reshaped landscapes and altered the course of human societies. Evidence suggests that floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, prolonged droughts, and rising sea levels may have erased entire cultures, leaving behind only fragmented traces. When such events strike suddenly or repeatedly, even well-organized civilizations can disappear from the record. Archaeological layers often reveal abrupt breaks in occupation. Cities show signs of rapid abandonment, with everyday objects left behind as if life was interrupted without warning. In coastal regions, rising seas after the last ice age likely submerged settlements that once supported thriving communities. These areas, now underwater, remain difficult to study, creating major gaps in our understanding of early human history. Environmental shifts can also trigger long-term collapse rather than immediate destruction. Changes in climate may disrupt agriculture, strain water supplies, or force migration. Over time, populations move, merge with others, or adapt in ways that erase distinct cultural identities. When written records do not survive, these transitions can appear invisible to later historians. What makes this especially significant is that many lost cultures may have possessed knowledge, skills, or technologies that vanished along with them. Without continuity, later societies may have had to rebuild from simpler foundations, unaware of what came before. Recognizing the role of natural forces forces historians to rethink absence itself. A lack of evidence does not always mean a lack of achievement. It may instead reflect how vulnerable human progress is to the planet it depends on. These realizations encourage a broader view of history, one that accounts not only for human ambition and creativity, but also for the environmental forces capable of quietly erasing entire chapters of the human story. Not all ancient technologies disappeared because they were flawed or ineffective. In many cases, they were abandoned despite working well. Archaeological evidence shows tools, construction methods, and production techniques that were once widely used, then gradually fell out of practice, leaving later generations unaware of their full potential. Some materials were processed with methods that produced exceptional durability or precision. Structures built using these techniques have survived for centuries, sometimes longer than modern equivalents. This suggests that ancient builders understood how to work with local resources in ways that maximized strength and longevity. Technological knowledge often depends on stable systems of education and apprenticeship. When societies experience disruption, whether through migration, conflict, or environmental stress, specialized skills can be lost quickly. If fewer people understand how a technique works, it becomes harder to maintain and eventually disappears altogether. In other cases, cultural shifts play a role. New priorities may favor faster or more accessible methods, even if they are less effective in the long term. Over time, efficiency replaces durability, and older techniques fade from collective memory. These forgotten technologies challenge the assumption that innovation always improves results. Sometimes, earlier solutions were simply different, optimized for their environment and needs rather than speed or scale. When they vanished, so did the knowledge required to reproduce them. For historians, rediscovering these lost methods is both frustrating and enlightening. It reveals how much human understanding depends on continuity. Once that chain is broken, even highly effective technologies can become mysteries, reminding us that progress is as much about preservation as it is about invention. As new discoveries accumulated, historians were faced with a difficult reality. Many long-accepted explanations no longer fit the evidence. Timelines that once seemed solid began to show inconsistencies, and theories that had shaped textbooks for decades required revision. History, once presented as a finished story, revealed itself as a work in progress. When unexpected findings emerge, they rarely overturn understanding overnight. Instead, they create tension between old models and new data. Scholars compare results, test assumptions, and slowly adjust interpretations. This process can take years, sometimes generations, as ideas are debated and refined. What becomes clear is that historical narratives are shaped by the evidence available at the time. As tools improve and new sites are explored, the story naturally evolves. This does not weaken history as a discipline. It strengthens it. The willingness to adapt reflects a commitment to accuracy rather than tradition. These shifts also influence how civilizations are compared. Societies once considered isolated or limited are now recognized as complex and interconnected. Others, previously seen as central to progress, are re-evaluated within a broader global context. Changing narratives can be uncomfortable, especially when they challenge familiar ideas. Yet they open the door to a richer and more inclusive understanding of the past. They allow historians to acknowledge uncertainty and complexity rather than forcing history into simple patterns. Each revision brings us closer to a more balanced view of human development, one that accepts that knowledge grows through questioning. In this way, history remains alive, shaped not by certainty, but by the ongoing search for deeper understanding. Many discoveries that challenge historical assumptions were not immediately accepted when they were first uncovered. In some cases, unusual findings were documented and then set aside because they did not fit existing models. Without a clear framework to explain them, their significance was easy to overlook. Over time, as similar discoveries emerged in different locations, patterns began to form. What once appeared to be isolated anomalies started to support one another. Improved dating methods, better surveying tools, and broader access to data allowed researchers to reevaluate older evidence with fresh perspective. This process highlights how interpretation plays a major role in historical understanding. Evidence does not speak for itself. It must be examined within context. When that context changes, so does the meaning of the evidence. Objects, structures, or data points once considered unimportant can suddenly become central to new interpretations. The re-evaluation of ignored evidence also reflects shifts in academic openness. As disciplines become more interdisciplinary, historians collaborate with geologists, engineers, and environmental scientists. These partnerships allow for explanations that were previously unavailable, bridging gaps between fields of study. Recognizing overlooked evidence encourages humility in historical research. It reminds scholars that certainty can limit curiosity and that unanswered questions are not failures but opportunities. By returning to old discoveries with new tools and questions, historians uncover layers of meaning that were always present but not fully understood. This evolving approach reinforces the idea that history is shaped not only by what we find, but by how willing we are to reconsider it. In doing so, the past becomes clearer, deeper, and more connected than before. Even with decades of research and countless discoveries, it is becoming increasingly clear that the historical record is incomplete. What we know represents only a fraction of what once existed. Entire chapters of human history may be absent, not because they never happened, but because their traces have not survived or have yet to be found. Much of early human activity took place in environments that do not preserve evidence well. Coastal regions, riverbanks, and fertile plains were ideal for settlement, yet these same areas are vulnerable to erosion, flooding, and rising sea levels. As landscapes changed, the physical markers of human presence were buried, scattered, or destroyed, leaving behind only silence. Time itself is another powerful eraser. Organic materials decay, structures collapse, and tools are recycled or repurposed. Without durable records, even advanced societies can fade almost completely from view. What remains may be only fragments, easily misinterpreted without broader context. This uncertainty forces historians to approach the past with caution. Absence of evidence cannot always be treated as evidence of absence. Instead, it suggests that history is shaped by survival bias, what endured long enough to be discovered, not necessarily what mattered most at the time. New technologies continue to expand what is possible. Remote sensing, deep-sea exploration, and advanced analysis methods are revealing signs of human activity in places once thought unreachable. Each new discovery hints at how much more may still lie hidden. Accepting that parts of history are missing does not weaken our understanding. It strengthens it by encouraging curiosity, openness, and patience. It reminds us that the human story is far larger than the pieces we currently hold, and that the past still has much to teach us if we are willing to keep searching. As we reach the end of today's journey, one idea becomes clear: history is not a finished book. It is a living story, constantly reshaped by new discoveries, better tools, and a willingness to question what we think we know. Each structure, artifact, and forgotten technique reminds us that the past was more complex, more connected, and more fragile than simple timelines suggest. What has survived to the present is only a fraction of what once existed, and every new finding has the power to change the bigger picture. These discoveries do not replace history, they deepen it. They encourage us to stay curious, to remain open-minded, and to accept uncertainty as part of understanding who we are and where we came from. Thank you for spending this time exploring the past with us. If you enjoyed this journey, stay curious, keep asking questions, and join us again as we continue uncovering the mysteries hidden within human history. See you next time.